On July 26, 2025, common northeastern Beijing began to unravel as relentless rain poured down over Miyun district. For hours, the downpour intensified with unusual force, and what initially seemed like a passing storm quickly turned into a growing threat. By nightfall, the rainfall showed no signs of letting up, and by the early morning of the next day, the situation had already reached a critical stage. At 9 a.m. on July 27th, Chinese authorities issued a red flood alert for the Miyun River Basin, an emergency measure taken only in the most severe of cases. At that moment, the water level at the Miyun Reservoir, Beijing's most vital water source and flood control infrastructure, had reached a breaking point. To prevent a catastrophic structural failure, officials made a drastic decision: release massive volumes of water. By 3 p.m., the floodgates were opened. Within minutes, a powerful surge of water rushed southward, sweeping everything in its path. This was not an isolated action. 9 additional reservoirs across the region also began simultaneous releases to relieve mounting pressure from the extreme rainfall. While the coordinated response was necessary, it triggered widespread collapse across the river system. Entire villages vanished underwater in Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei. Authorities urgently shut down 352 mountain flood channels, which, while intended to control flow, caused widespread backflow in lower areas and worsened the flooding. One of the first places to fall victim to the water's force was the village of Lulimiayakan in Huairou district. Streets turned into muddy streams. Courtyards were buried under more than a meter of sludge, and cars were dragged away like paper boats. In Taipingzhuang, around 500 residents had to flee their homes in the dark, with no choice but to escape into the night. In Mujiyu, another vulnerable area, more than 240 residents were urgently relocated. Access to high-risk zones was blocked off through 9 traffic checkpoints. As Beijing struggled to contain the disaster, neighboring Shanxi province faced its own tragedy. In Tianjin County, a minibus carrying farm workers was swept away by a flash flood, leaving 14 people missing and 1 confirmed dead. Search and rescue operations were immediately mobilized. 700 personnel, along with helicopters, drones, and rescue boats, were deployed to locate survivors. By the morning of July 28th, the rain still had not stopped. In many locations, rainfall totals exceeded 300 millimeters in just 48 hours, figures well above emergency thresholds. The town of Taishitun, located downstream of the Miyun Reservoir, became one of the hardest-hit areas. Social media videos showed homes submerged up to their windows and cars floating down Yangon Street. In a matter of hours, daily life was replaced with scenes of disaster. Power outages and communication failures added to the chaos. In the community of Sawanzi, around 100 people were evacuated to a makeshift shelter set up in a local school. Authorities used drones and specialized vehicles to reach isolated areas. The reservoir's inflow reached a record-breaking 6,550 cubic meters per second, the highest ever recorded since 1951. Meanwhile, in Pinggu district southeast of the capital, rain continued to fall at alarming rates. In just half a day, over 300 millimeters were recorded in the area, causing rivers to overflow and submerge entire towns. Mountain roads were closed due to landslide risks. In Huairou, many residents climbed to their rooftops waiting for help. Some were rescued by inflatable rafts, while others remained trapped without power or communication. At a nursing home in Taishitun, 48 elderly residents were rescued one by one amidst tense and emotional scenes. In Hebei, the situation mirrored the devastation. In Qingde, residents tied themselves to trees to avoid being carried away. In Zhuozhou, streets turned into violent rivers, stores were inundated, and residential buildings flooded. In E County, over 450 millimeters of rain forced evacuations from mountain communities. Luomping reported a deadly landslide that killed 4 people, with 8 more still missing. In Baoding, at least 2 fatalities were linked to the floods, and the number of missing continued to rise along with public anxiety. Meteorologists warned that an additional 300 millimeters could fall during the night of July 28th. The Ministry of Water Resources confirmed that 41 rivers had overflowed and issued warnings for 11 provinces. The impact on infrastructure was severe. Roads collapsed, bridges fell, and drainage systems failed. Many towns in Miyun remained without electricity or mobile service. A Level 1 emergency alert, the highest possible, was officially declared. The Ministry of Finance allocated 50 million yuan in emergency relief funds to the affected regions. In Jialingzi, residents reported the total loss of their homes. In other villages across Miyun and Pinggu, rescue teams continued to rely on drones to locate people trapped under debris and rising waters. The National Weather Service maintained a red rain alert and urged residents to take extreme caution due to the risk of secondary disasters. In Shanxi, the search for the missing was still underway as rain persisted. Images of rooftops barely visible above water, vehicles drifting in flood currents, and last-minute rescues flooded digital platforms. Hydrological monitoring centers worked around the clock, sharing real-time data with emergency officials. By the end of July 28th, over 4,400 people have been evacuated from Miyun district alone, not including the thousands who fled in surrounding provinces. Authorities continue to urge the public to avoid rivers and unstable slopes as evacuation efforts intensified. The emergency response remained fully active. Rescue operations, supply distribution, and urgent infrastructure repairs became part of daily life in the disaster zone. Experts warned that unless the rainfall subsided, the worst might still be ahead. The looming threat of further collapses and landslides kept communities on high alert. Northern China remained in a volatile state, with extreme weather conditions continuing to unfold. Although emergency measures were in place, the sheer scale of destruction meant recovery would be slow and challenging. The weeks ahead would require coordinated action, extensive rebuilding, and a renewed focus on disaster preparedness to avoid future catastrophes.